Swine It. It's time for a new era of communication in the swine industry, one that you can get the latest updates while commuting or driving to farms. Here you have the brightest minds of the global swine industry in your pocket.
I think just having the system up and running, if we think about African swine fever and if we have an outbreak tomorrow, just being able to communicate in a timely manner.
Swine It podcast is only possible with the support of forward-looking and innovative companies like Gestal, always one step ahead in swine feeding, Every Pig, a simple yet powerful pig health and production management tool, NutriQuest, experts serving producers and delivering breakthrough solutions, Zimpro, essential trace minerals, exceptional performance, and Genesis, the first power in genetics. Welcome to Swine It Podcast. My name is Marcio Gonçalves, your host for today's episode. This episode's sponsor highlight is about Genesis. Genesis is the largest independent producer of high-health registered purebred swine in the globe, having over 80% of all registered purebred breeding stock in Canada. The Genesis genetic program uses genomic selection strategies focused on productivity, faster growth, efficiency, high yield, and meat quality. To know more, go to genesis.com. Hello everyone. Today we have a very special guest, Dr. Andreia Arruda, and we'll get her thoughts on tackling emerging diseases with producer-driven monitoring systems. We are living a very special time in the history of swine production around the globe with the challenges with African swine fever, in Asia in general, a little bit in Europe, and of course North America, South America, and other places need to be very prepared to handle that. So with that said, how are you today, Andreia?
I'm very good, Marcio. Thank you very much for the invitation.
I appreciate your time to being here with us today. And without further ado, tell us about yourself. How did you get involved with pig production and also epidemiology and etc.?
Sure. So I'm originally from Brazil. I did my DVM in Brazil and wanted to work with cats and dogs, as 90% of our students do. I found swine production super interesting on my third year of vet school and decided to come to the United States to work in a farm. So I was a staff on a 1,200 farrow-to-wind facility in Minnesota. This is how I got some hands-on experience and also fell in love with research and data-driven decisions data to inform decisions in swine production. So after I went back to Brazil, finished my DVM, I decided to pursue a master's in infectious disease epidemiology. And then that led to a Ph.D., particularly with PRRS virus. And this is when I got to work with and get to know more about these disease control projects. After my Ph.D., I went back to Minnesota, where everything kind of started. And I did a one-year postdoc with Dr. Bob Morrison at the University of Minnesota. And from there, I got this assistant professor position here at The Ohio State University, where I just completed a little over 2 years now. Very nice. It went by fast. Yeah, I remember when you just joined Ohio State, and very nice. So tell us a little bit of what is a disease control program and how do they work? Yeah, so disease control programs started coming around with PRRS, of course, because since this is not a reportable disease, I think producers and veterinarians felt the need of having a way to track disease and understand disease over time. So these projects, I like to say that they come in different flavors. I've been closely connected to 2 or 3 of them, and they vary a little bit, but I think overall they're mostly voluntary in nature. And they're very much industry driven. So it's producers, it's vets coming together and say, hey, we want to do this. We want to share data to learn more about disease or diseases of interest. Usually these projects, this basically a lot of systems or producers or vet clinics even sharing data on disease occurrence over time. And their objective is basically to understand the prevalence and possibly even risk factors for disease. Usually I would say they have the main objective of reducing such prevalence, of course, and decreasing the risk of transmission of disease. Also monitoring the disease trends over time and understanding what is normal, for instance, for PRRS, what is normal and what is abnormal, when can we potentially be talking about an outbreak. And of course, with all this data that is gathered, hopefully the main goal would be also to support design and implementation of adequate control strategies based on what people have been learning sometimes over years. And better prepare the industry for a potential emerging disease would also be a kind of an extra gain from sharing data and having these communication channels.
Very good. Yeah, those are very important initiatives. Can you give us a few examples of those programs?
Yeah, so I think these programs originally started as regional, so it would be, the north of Minnesota, so part of a state, and then they kind of expanded. So there are two projects that I'm pretty familiar with since I worked with both of them. So the first one is the nationwide project MSHMP out of Minnesota, so the Morrison Swine Health Monitoring Project. That is, I think, the largest project, perhaps in the whole world. They started with tracking PRRS virus incidents, and then they expanded to PED, Seneca virus, A virus, and even neurological syndromes. That project accumulated almost 10 years worth of data as of today. Yeah, and they have over 50% of the US sow population represented in there, so it's obviously a very powerful tool. Like I said, these projects will vary a little bit, so this project does not include any mapping. I would say is not their main thing. They're mostly sharing disease incidents over time, and that goes actually out publicly for PRRS. But there's no mapping platform readily available. I know they do that for specific systems if they wish, and they work together with systems for different tools, but it's not how they started. And that project particularly had different funding mechanisms involved, and it's run through the University of Minnesota. The other project that I was connected through my PhD years was the Ontario ARC&E project, so Area Regional Control and Elimination Projects. This is a statewide project. It started a little later than the one from Minnesota. It started around 2013. And same thing, they started with PRRS and then kind of expanded as we had some other disease challenges in our industry. It currently has over 60% of Ontario's sow population, which is big because Ontario, I believe, is the second largest pig producer in Canada, second or third. And this project started as their main goal was mapping. So they have a very active mapping system, which is accessible by vets and enrolled producers. And they have a very active disease notice system as well. So veterinarians, producers, and even service providers are using that in a routine basis to see where the most recent outbreaks are at and maybe what they can do to try and decrease the risk of getting an outbreak on the farms. So both of those projects, they have periodic reports that either are kept on a more private circle or sometimes they can go public. So those are two examples of what I think are pretty impressive projects that are still going on and have completed a couple of years.
Very good. Great projects. I'm a little more familiar with the Minnesota one, not so much from the Canadian, but that sounds very good. How do you see these platforms helping in the case of an emerging disease?
So I think there are kind of two parts to that. I think for the first benefit that these projects can bring to preparedness is that they do a lot of validation. So I think we kind of learned it the hard way that we are not amazing in having prem IDs connected to one facility. So this is one of the things, just finding out the exact addresses and, differentiating from producers' home address versus actual facility or farm or different barns, and how do those separate. I think it's something that for sure, just going through that validation process to organize things for these projects has been extremely helpful for producers and vets. And the other thing is that I think just having the system up and running, if we think about African swine fever and, if we have an outbreak tomorrow, just being able to communicate in a timely manner. And we also know that because of the incubation period, we actually may have a bunch of cases around the same time. So just disseminating this information and being proactive in terms of how can I prevent this thing right away. There are going to be other prevention measures coming from government and other entities, but what producers can do in the field to prevent and to help protect in their farms. I think a project like this that offers this platform and these communication channels could be extremely important for us to just get the information out there with the sharing.
Very nice. I was just thinking about, I know the example of Brazil that you are also very familiar with. I'm not aware of a similar system in Brazil. Is there one there or not yet?
Not that I am aware of either. Right. I don't think so.
So in countries like Brazil and others that don't have that yet, what do you think are the first few steps to establish that?
Yeah, so I know Mexico, for example, have some projects, and usually, it's kind of it has to be producer driven, and so veterinarians and producers need to be on board. So I don't think a good way for this to happen would be myself, a researcher, coming and saying, hey guys, I want to help you out. I think this has to be something coming from them. And then I think the universities and other institutions have the ability to help with the platform and organization of information and even analysis in the later stages. But I do think that a very important component for these projects to be successful is that they do have to come from the producers and the veterinarians. So I think the first steps would be to present to them, how do these projects help you or how they may, and then we do need a leader. We need a leader directly connected on the boots on the ground type of person that is proactive and that is very engaging and enthusiastic as well. I think those are very important components for a project like this to be successful.
Very nice. Makes total sense. Any insights on how to make these programs sustainable in the long run, and if you can give us a few examples of that as well?
Sure. Yeah, I think there has to be some commitment from everyone, right? So periodic meetings are very important because it keeps people engaged. It keeps people up to date on what's happening and what the needs are. Let's say maybe we want to include a new disease, or maybe we want to set up a special workshop. So I think producer and veterinarian meetings are very important to keep this going. If it's every 6 months or every 3-4 months, I think that there has to be that commitment there. I think this helps sustainability because you kind of keep updated needs in sight. Another thing that we learned with the two projects I mentioned is that giving producers and vets a meaning to the data they're sharing, in other words, giving it back to them, is very important. So you can imagine these data sets are huge. Most of the times they don't only have disease incidence, but also some demographics, such as farm size, and they have their geographical location, which allow us to actually have a lot of information in regards to terrain characteristics or weather parameters. So I think using those things to inform, for example, what are the risk factors for this disease? What are some protective factors? These are a couple of things that we've been doing, particularly with PRRS, and that people have found it helpful, and then they'll be more willing to share information because they actually see that, let's say, people from the universities, they're looking into that and actually producing some research and applicable research for people that are on the ground and need those answers.
Very good. Thank you for that. Anything else before we move to the 3 questions we ask every guest?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I'd be happy to give you some examples of things a little bit more precise on what we did. If that's of interest, I could give you some examples on PERS and what we did using those data set.
Yes.
Sure. Yeah. So a few things that we did was, for example, we could assess area spread and what was the importance of that on PERS spread. So in other words, if I have a positive neighbor, am I more likely to be positive? And we did that with the Canadian data set, and we saw that was not always true. We could see some clusters of disease, so some hotspots. But at the end of the day, we didn't really see that having a neighbor close by would increase your risk of being positive for PERS. So this was kind of unexpected for the Canadian folks, and that really brought us the idea that maybe biosecurity is really important, and you can prevent PERS from getting into your herd that is actually under your control. It's not only it's spread by the area and there's nothing I can do. So I think that attitude change was really important for us. It was a good lesson from some of these analyses that we did. Yeah, and the other intriguing one, and this one is from the Minnesota data. We were this question that came from a producer. He was asking us whether terrain slope was important for PERS risk, as well as having trees around. We know from the poultry industry that trees could be protective from a variety of pathogens. So we hadn't done that for PERS before this producer came up with this idea. And that's something that the data set allows us to go in and look without much more effort in gathering data. The data was already there, a couple hundred farms, so pretty decent sample size for an epidemiologist like me that gets us excited. So we could go in and we actually saw that trees could be protective. And I mean, there's a bunch of hypotheses as to why that might be the case. But I think a lot of these data sets are now available, and in conjunction with public data, we can make a lot of sense and get some answers to our producers.
Very nice. Very good. Exciting stuff for epidemiologists.
Definitely. We are all about the data, so the more projects, the better.
So cool. Thanks so much, Andreia. The truth is, precision swine production is not the future, it's the present. Every Pig is the intelligent pig health platform. It is a simple yet powerful pig health and production management tool. Request a free 20 minutes demonstration at www.everypig.co. It is time to our famous three. Well, now we can jump into the three questions we ask every guest. So the first one is, what's your favorite swine-related book?
Okay, I have to go with the classic for that one and say Diseases of Swine, because I think that's kind of my Bible. I keep going back there when I have to remind myself of a disease that I haven't seen in a while, maybe since vet school. So I think I would go with that one for that question.
Very nice, very good book. How about a book that is not related to pigs?
A book not related to pigs that I read recently is called The Paradox of Choice. It's from Barry Schwartz. And I think that in today's world, when we have a lot of choices, I think that was a really nice book that explains a little bit behind the psychology of having too many choices and how sometimes that can drive us a little crazy, and the whole strategy behind that. So I highly recommend it. I recommend that book.
Very interesting. Huh. And what separates successful swine professionals from those that are not?
I think I had a couple of mentors that always told me that they can be super experienced and have a lot of knowledge, but you always have to keep an open mind. And I think questioning things and double questioning things and looking for answers is the best characteristics that one could have. I think I do have projects, because as an epidemiologist, I do have projects with different animal species, and every day I'm learning something different with a different commodity, or maybe it's a different geographical region. So I think keeping an open mind and always being willing to learn with others, even if they're less experienced than you in the field, I think is a good attitude for any successful swine person.
Open mind. Very good. Well, thanks so much, Andreia. Your time is very appreciated. I'm sure our audience is also going to enjoy a lot this episode, and very important topic. Hopefully, we can keep the countries that are free from ASF. We can keep that going, and we'll need your help if not.
That sounds good. I'll be ready. Thank you so much, Marcio, for inviting me.
Thanks, Andrea.